Hello and welcome to the National World War II Museum's podcast series, Service on Celluloid. This podcast is brought to you through the generous support of the Albert and Ethel Hertzstein Charitable Foundation. This is our mini episode where I will hone in on some of the finer points from last week's main episode. My name is Seth Paradin, historian and digital content manager here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, and today I'll be continuing our discussion on the 2004 film Downfall, or Der Untergang as it was released in Germany. Downfall focuses on the events inside Hitler's Führer bunker in Berlin in 1945 during the last days of the Third Reich. The film shows the human side and the personal stories buried within the madness that was the downfall of the supposed thousand-year Reich. Downfall draws heavily on personal accounts written in post-war books by witnesses to the events such as Traudl Junge, Hitler's secretary, and Rokas Misch, an SS telephone operator and radioman inside the bunker. Downfall stars Bruno Ganz as Adolf Hitler, Alexandra Maria Lara as Traudl Junge, Ulrich Mathis as Josef Goebbels, Julian Kohler as Eva Braun, Thomas Kretschmann, Christian Berkel, and many, many more. The film was directed by Oliver Hirschbiegel, written by Bernd Eichinger, based on Traudl Junge's book Until the Final Hour, and Inside Hitler's Bunker by Joachim Fest. Downfall received mixed but mostly positive reviews upon release. One of the topics that we touched upon in the main episode was the fact that there are a great many people that are depicted in this movie that audiences, especially American audiences, know little to nothing about. The list of those personalities would be very long if I talked about each and every one, and truth be told, some of the personalities that are depicted have very little information on them. Even the people whom we see throughout the movie, like Dr. Ernst Gunther Schenk, have very little available about their entire background. But there are a few people whom we see that I feel deserve a bit more biographical information. And providing this information, it's my hope that it will help you, the viewer of the film, to better understand some of these people and how they fit into the madness that was the downfall of the Reich. One of the more remarkable personalities, at least militarily, is that of Wilhelm Mohnke. At the time of the defense of Berlin, Mohnke held the rank of SS Brigadeführer, which is equivalent to about a major general in the United States Army. Mohnke had a long history with the SS, initially joining in 1931, being among the first 15,000 men to wear the Death's Head. In 1933, he served in the role of personal guard for Hitler under the command of Sepp Dietrich. When the Waffen-SS expanded and formed combat divisions, Mohnke served with the 1st SS Leibstandarte from the invasion of Poland through the Yugoslavian and Balkans campaign of 1941. Like a great many Waffen-SS commanders, Mohnke was not free of guilt, or at least accusations of guilt, for war crimes committed against enemy prisoners of war. In May 1940, he and his unit, the 2nd Battalion of the Infantry Regiment Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, were accused of murdering 80 British and French prisoners of war near the French town of Wormhout. In post-war years, he was accused of having ordered the executions, but never was brought to trial through lack of evidence. Mohnke vehemently denied having issued orders of execution. And that being said, the executions of the Allied POWs did take place, and they were committed by the Leibstandarte. Now, whether Mohnke ordered it to happen or not will never be known, but the onus of responsibility always lies on the commander's shoulders. By 1943, Mohnke was a commanding officer in the new 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend and saw heavy combat in Normandy. His unit was among the few that was able to hold open the escape corridor after the German debacle at Falaise. Mohnke served with the Leibstandarte again for the Battle of the Bulge, this time as divisional commander. In January, he was wounded for the 3rd time and put on Hitler's reserve list. This is where he came to command the units involved in the fighting in Berlin in April of 1945. Mohnke was personally ordered by Hitler to defend the government district in Berlin to the last man. He and his battle group operated outside of the peripherals of Army General Weidling, and viewers of the film will remember Weidling to be the general who reports to the bunker to be executed, only to be given command of the entire city's defenses. We'll get to this madness in a few. Mohnke's battle group, Kampfgruppe Mohnke, was strong in name but weak in reality. Composed of Waffen-SS from training units of the Leibstandarte, flak units, Himmler's personal escort, as well as Hitler's personal bodyguard, the unit and its soldiers were doomed to fail. Between Kampfgruppe Mohnke and Weidling's forces, a meager 45,000 trained military and a further estimated 40,000 Volkssturm, who were pathetically untrained, were there to supposedly stop the onrushing force of over 1 million Soviet soldiers. A hopeless case and a virtual death sentence for the defenders. By all accounts, Mohnke was fanatical in his defense of the government district and followed Hitler's orders to the very T. Only after receiving word of Hitler's suicide did Mohnke's mission turn from defense to survival. After conferring with other German officers, he decided to lead a breakout attempt to escape Soviet capture. The plan, of course, was to cross the Elbe and reach Western Allied lines. Mohnke led a group of potential escapees that included Secretary Traudl Junge, Secretary Gerda Christian, Secretary Elsa Kruger, Hitler's dietitian Konstanz Manziarli, Ernst Günther Schenk, Walter Huel, and others. Munka's group headed along the subway, but their route was blocked by Soviet infantry, so they went above ground and were subject to intense Soviet fire as they joined hundreds of German civilians and military personnel at a brewery. On May 2nd, following the order to surrender from General Weidling, Munka surrendered to Soviet forces. On May 3rd, Munka and other officers were sent by the Soviet Army to the NKVD, where Munka was then sentenced to 6 years in solitary confinement in Lubyanka. He remained in Soviet captivity until 1955, and he died in 2001, just living outside of Hamburg. Exact casualties for Munka's defenders are unknown to me, at least at the time of this broadcast, but overall for the city center of Berlin, roughly 22,000 military dead and a further 22,000 estimated Volkssturm dead. Of course, exact numbers will probably never be known. And when you look at those numbers, an estimated 44,000 human beings killed in the fighting. Oh, and by the way, that number does not reflect the civilians killed in the fighting, nor does it reflect the estimated 2 million German women raped by the Soviets as they entered Germany and ended in Berlin. You have to wonder why on earth did those people fight and die for clearly a defeated nation and defeated cause. Continuing the fight against an enemy that any sane person would know is impossible to defeat, at that stage anyway, borders on, well, madness, which to me is what Downfall, the film, is all about. I'm not talking about the madness of the Third Reich. That is a conversation that would take weeks to get through. I'm talking about the madness to sacrifice yourself when you know that what you are doing is fruitless, that your death will amount to nothing at all. The sacrifice or blind devotion all stems from one man, namely Adolf Hitler. It never ceases to confound historians like myself how one man so captivated a nation and held such a tight grip as to be able to order his supposed people to their annihilation and have them willingly go to their deaths, all in his name and the name of National Socialism. There are many examples of this type of behavior. There are several depictions of it in Downfall. The flak girl and the young Luftwaffe crewman condemning the old man for being a defeatist and then shooting each other when they realize their defeat. The suicide of the diplomat Huel at the end of the film. Here he is surviving the bunker and about to be captured. Now granted, he probably would have faced prison time, but at least he would live. But no, he decides to take poison and shoot himself, as did his leader a couple of days before. It's hard to understand, honestly. Ignorant people today would scoff at their decisions as stupid, but there had to be a reason why these people and countless others chose death over a life without National Socialism. In writing this episode, I was at a loss as to how to answer the thought that I just posed. I usually have a pithy answer for most questions I pose, but honest to God, this one escaped me. Then I came across a copy of the interrogation of Erna Flegel. The transcript of the interrogation was declassified by the CIA a number of years ago. Flegel is portrayed in the film as the nurse who goes with Dr. Schenk and Dr. Werner Haase to speak to Hitler as to how best kill himself. In the film, she falls into hysterics at the thought of Hitler killing himself and is ushered out of the room by Schenk. After reading the actual transcript of the interrogation, I can see how that portrayal was probably pretty accurate. It will also give you a glimpse into why these suicidal people did what they did. I'll read you a bit of an excerpt from Flegel's interrogation. As a bit of background, Flegel took the job at the Reichschancellery in 1944 as a nurse and lived there until the very end. When asked about Hitler, she said, and I quote, "When Hitler was in the room, he filled it entirely with his personality. You saw only him. Aside from him, nothing else existed. The fascinating thing about him was his eyes. Up to the end, it was impossible to turn away from his eyes." And she goes on, "At the end, we were like a big family. It was a common fate which we were experiencing and an atmosphere of truly comradely association. The terrific dynamics of the fate which was unrolling held sway over all of us. We were Germany, and we were going through the end of the Third Reich and of the war, concerning the outcome of which we had hoped up to the end for a favorable and tolerable issue. A sister, who was a stranger, expressed her thanks to Hitler and said, quote, 'Führer, we believe in you and a good outcome,' unquote." In the report, the CIA came to the conclusion, based on other accounts from bunker survivors, that the, quote, "sister," unquote, Flegel refers to in her report is actually Flegel herself. Other statements from bunker survivors claim that Flegel was the woman who uttered in a whimpering, tear-filled voice, "Führer, we believe in you and a good outcome. We believe in you and a good outcome," even in the midst of the hell that was Berlin in April 1945. Unreal. Another character in Downfall whom you will undoubtedly not forget, and who is also directly tied to the madness, who in my humble opinion was both a psychopath and an evil, deranged person, is Magda Goebbels. You will remember her as the wife of Joseph Goebbels, and the lovely mother who murdered her 6 children because she didn't want them to live in a world without National Socialism. Mom of the Year. Erna Flegel had a few things to say about Magda as well. She described her as, quote, a brilliant woman, on a far higher level than most people, adding that she had been his of course being Joseph Goebbels, guiding genius. Flegel added about Magda, quote, it took a resolute spirit to decide to sacrifice her own children. Indeed, it required more resolution than for Hitler to take his own life, unquote. I'll let you think on that one for a second. In later years, I guess as she began to see the light, 2005 to be exact, she said of the Goebbels children who were murdered by their mother, quote, the children were charming. They would have delighted anybody. They played with each other in the bunker, she said. They should have been allowed to live. They had nothing to do with what was going on around them. Not to spare the children was madness. Dreadful, unquote. Magda Goebbels, like many of the bunker inmates, was what I call a true believer. She was utterly devoted to Nazism, and specifically Adolf Hitler. There were rumors of an affair between the two of them, but that is highly, highly doubtful. However, the apparent affection between Hitler and Magda, mostly on Magda's side, was clear to anyone who saw them. Magda had given birth to 7 children in her lifetime. Her oldest son, Harold, was in the Luftwaffe and was a product of her first marriage. The other 6 children were from Joseph, and of course were the innocent souls who were killed in the bunker by poison. How could a mother kill her own children? Well, that I certainly cannot answer, but I can give you an insight to her way of thinking. In the final days of the Reich, Magda wrote a letter to her eldest son, Harold. I'll read portions of it as it is very long. Listen to the words here. They are written by a brainwashed, twisted, and sick mind. My beloved son, we have now been here in the Fuhrer's bunker for 6 days. Papa, your 6 little brothers and sisters, and I, in order to bring our National Socialist existence to the only possible and honorable conclusion. Our splendid concept is perishing, and with it goes everything beautiful, admirable, noble, and good that I have known in my life. The world which will succeed the Fuhrer and National Socialism is not worth living in, and is the reason I have brought the children here too. They are too good for the life that will come after, and a gracious God will understand me if I myself give them release from it. Yesterday evening, the Fuhrer took off his golden party badge and pinned it on me. I am happy and proud. God grant that I retain the strength to do the last and most difficult thing. We have only one aim in life now, to remain loyal to the Fuhrer unto death. That we should be able to end our life together with him is a gift of fate for which we would never dared hope. Live for Germany. Your mother. And with that, I want to thank you for listening. Be sure to tune in next week when we discuss the 1953 film From Here to Eternity. Until then, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Service on Celluloid. Be sure to rate and review us on Stitcher and iTunes if you like what you hear. I'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible, our producer, Tessa Jager, and sound engineer, Jeremy Burson. This has been a production of the National World War II Museum.